Denied boarding his own private jet over a security issue. Keanu Reeves calmly stepped aside while the crew rolled their eyes, convinced he was being difficult. 10 minutes later, a sudden emergency forced the pilot to confront a deadly mistake. Realizing the man he'd just humiliated was the only reason everyone on that runway was still alive. I still remember that night at the private airfield, like it's burned into the back of my mind. The smell of jet fuel, wet asphalt, and cheap coffee was hanging in the air, and none of us had any idea that in 10 minutes, the man everybody thought was just an actor would be the only one thinking clearly. It was just past midnight when Keanu Reeves stepped out of the black SUV, hood up, hands in the pockets of a worn-out leather jacket. No entourage, no shouting assistants, just him and the driver who'd been joking with the guards a second earlier. The sodium lights washed everything in a pale yellow, and the wind pushed little waves through puddles left by a light rain. He moved like a guy who'd been awake too long but refused to show it, shoulders relaxed, eyes quietly scanning everything, like he was more interested in the people around him than the fact that a private jet was waiting with his name on it. From where I stood near the hangar doors, holding a clipboard I barely needed, I watched him stop when he saw the youngest mechanic on our crew, Anna, struggling with a toolbox almost as big as her. Most celebrities never even noticed the ground crew. Keanu stepped out of the light path to make room for a fuel truck, then crossed over to her instead of heading straight to the stairs like everyone expected. He didn't say anything big, just, "You okay there?" In a voice so soft I almost missed it under the hum of the APU. She nodded, cheeks flushed, trying to pretend the handle wasn't cutting into her hands. He took one end of the box without asking, like it was the most normal thing in the world that a Hollywood star would carry tools across wet pavement at 1 in the morning. The jet waiting for him wasn't some monstrous flying palace. It was a sleek mid-size Gulfstream, white with a thin silver stripe that caught whatever light it could. The door was open, staircase down, and the flight attendant, Maria, was standing at the top, checking her watch every 30 seconds. We were behind schedule and everyone could feel it. The charter company owner hated delays. The pilot hated anything that made the owner unhappy. And right then, what made the pilot unhappy had a name, a face, and a box office record. Captain Dane Collins was by the nose of the aircraft, talking in a tight, strained voice to Anna's supervisor. Tall, ex-military, posture straight as a metal rod, Collins had that look some people get when they've spent too long being obeyed and not long enough being questioned. I couldn't hear every word over the engine whine, but I caught enough. "The report is clear," Collins said, jaw clenched. "We're wheels up in 10. Anna's supervisor, a thick-necked guy named Rivas, shoved a tablet toward him. "She's new, overcautious. The system flagged a sensor last week. It's been signed off. We're fine." Anna stood a step back, rain dotting her dark ponytail, hands twisting the edge of her reflective vest. "Captain, the vibration's still there on the left side. At high RPM. I can feel it in the fuselage. If the sensor's glitching, we should." Rivas cut her off with a look that could freeze fuel. "She thinks she feels it. Numbers don't lie. Sign the clearance, Collins or Sterling's gonna be on the phone again." Keanu set the toolbox down near their feet and didn't walk away. He could have pretended he'd heard nothing, but instead he tilted his head, listening like this wasn't just somebody else's technical argument about metal he was about to sit inside of. His eyes moved from Anna's tense hands to Collins' tight mouth, to the jet itself, as if he could see into the engine cowling just by wanting to. "What kind of vibration?" he asked, voice calm, almost curious. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him at once. You could feel the air change. Collins looked him over like a teacher who'd been interrupted by a student who walked in late. "Mr. Reeves," Collins said, with a practiced half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just a routine pre-flight conversation, nothing for you to worry about." Anna hesitated, then took a breath like someone who just decided this might be her only chance to say the truth out loud. "At taxi and takeoff power," she said, glancing once at her supervisor, then back at Keanu. "Left engine. It's not normal, it's uneven. It might be nothing, but we should run another check. It's another 20 minutes max." Rivas muttered under his breath. "She wants to keep her hands clean, that's all." Keanu didn't raise his voice. You already ran diagnostics tonight. Rivas answered quickly. System shows green. Maintenance log is clear. This plane has flown 4 times this week without incident. Sir, if we keep delaying, you're going to miss your slot over the Pacific. Collins folded his arms. We have procedures, Mr. Reeves. If there was a real issue, I wouldn't take this aircraft off the ground. I've got 22 years in the cockpit. With respect, I know the difference between nerves and danger. Anna flinched at the word nerves. Her eyes flashed with something between anger and shame. Keanu noticed. You could see it in the way his shoulders softened, like he recognized that feeling of not being taken seriously because you were the least powerful person in the room. Is there a way to be sure? He asked. For her, for you, for everyone on board. He gestured lightly toward the fuselage, toward Maria at the stairs who pretended to be focused on her phone, and toward the co-pilot inside doing final checks. If it's 20 minutes, I don't mind waiting. Behind him, his driver checked his own watch, already calculating the overtime. The wind lifted the edge of Keanu's jacket, sending a spray of cold air up his arm, but he didn't move. Collins looked up at the overcast sky, then at his tablet, weighing fuel, schedules, his own pride. I watched his jaw work back and forth as thunder rumbled far off in the valley. He was the kind of man who'd been trained never to show doubt, especially not in front of a passenger, especially not in front of someone famous enough that every word might end up online. With respect, Collins repeated, but this time there was steel in it. There is a way to be sure. It's called trusting the chain of command. I'm the captain. The aircraft is cleared. If she had real data, not a feeling, that would be different. But I will not ground this jet on a theory from a trainee who started 2 months ago. Anna's lips parted, like she was going to speak again, then shut. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. Keanu's gaze lingered on her, then moved back to Collins. For a second, I thought he was going to push, use that quiet authority he carried around like a coat he rarely put on. Instead, his expression softened. He nodded slowly. I get it, he said. You're responsible up there. He paused, then added, I've just seen what happens when people ignore the one person who feels something's wrong. There was a shadow in his eyes when he said that, some old memory he didn't explain. None of us asked. Some people carry their ghosts right behind their pupils. You don't have to know the story to recognize that they're real. Maria called down from the stairs, voice bright and brittle. Captain, we really need to start boarding. Collins lifted his chin. Understood. Mr. Reeves, if you're ready, we can get you out of this weather. That should have been it. Everyone start moving, bags loaded, doors closed. But nothing that night went the way it was supposed to. As Keanu stepped toward the stairs, the radio clipped to the belt of our head of security crackled. Wade, a former cop who walked like his vest was still under his jacket, pressed a finger to his earpiece and listened. His eyes narrowed, then cut straight to Keanu. Hold up, sir, Wade called, one hand rising in a firm stop gesture. Keanu stopped, mid-step, boot on the first metal rung of the stair. He looked down at Wade, then back up at Maria, whose smile faded a fraction. What's up? Keanu asked, no edge to it yet. Wade walked closer, listening to another line of static, then whatever came after it. We've got a security flag on your name from the booking system, some mismatch on ID verification and the manifest. He kept his voice low, but I was close enough to hear. We just need to clear it before you board, protocol. Keanu blinked once like he was doing the math. I've flown with you guys 3 times this month, he said. Same passport, same everything. Yeah, Wade said, clearly annoyed at the timing himself. System just updated. Could be nothing. But with the federal audits lately, if I let you board before we're clear and it turns out there's an issue, I'm the one who loses my job. Rain tapped a faster rhythm on the tarmac. Behind Keanu, the APU whined a little louder as the jet pulled more power. Collins checked his watch, muttered something under his breath I didn't catch, and disappeared back into the cockpit. Can we do this while we're boarding? Maria called, trying to sound casual. He can sit while you scan whatever you need, right? Wade's fingers tightened around the radio. Negative, captain's orders, no boarding until security is 100% cleared. He glanced up at Keanu. His words, not mine, sir. For the first time, something flickered across Keanu's face that looked like real frustration. Not rage, not ego, just that tired, quiet anger of someone who knew this wasn't about a computer glitch at all. He looked over at the terminal window, where I knew the owner of the charter company, Sterling, was probably watching the clock and cursing the cost of every extra minute. "So I'm flagged," Keanu said slowly, "but the plane's not." Wade exhaled, fogging the cold air. "Sir, please step back from the stairs while we sort this out." There were a dozen ways he could have fought. He could have demanded to talk to a manager, called his agent, thrown his weight around, reminded everyone exactly how many millions of people knew his face. Instead, Keanu stepped back down, boots clanging softly on the metal, and moved aside so that the wind from the idling engine didn't hit the nearest baggage handler full on. He slipped his backpack off one shoulder and held it in front of him, waiting. "Okay," he said, "sort it out." The driver shifted his weight, whispered, "You want me to call someone?" But Keanu shook his head. "No, they're just doing their job," he murmured, though his eyes drifted just for a second to Anna. She was staring at the left wing again, brow furrowed, as if listening for something the rest of us were too deaf or too distracted to hear. Passengers, just a couple of team members and a producer, were waved past him up the stairs. One of them, a guy in a sharp gray blazer, shot Keanu a puzzled look, then decided not to get involved. It's funny how fast people decide if your problem is their problem. Most of the time, they decide it is. Wade took Keanu's passport, snapped a photo of it with his phone, and stepped aside to talk to someone on the other end of the line. Every now and then, he'd glance back, as if to make sure his difficult passenger was staying put. Keanu rubbed his thumb absently over a frayed edge of his backpack strap. You could see the fight inside him, the part that wanted to push back to say, "This is ridiculous," and the part that had been through enough to know that anger rarely fixes a broken system. He swallowed it like he had a lifetime of practice. Thunder rolled again, closer this time. From the hangar wall, I watched him shift his weight from one foot to the other, eyes moving over the aircraft, the ground crew, the way the wind just barely shook the left wing. His gaze lingered on a thin, dark line under the fuselage, trickling from somewhere near the wing root toward a puddle that hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. It was so faint I almost missed it, just a slightly different shine on the wet ground under the flashing beacon. That's when Anna looked up and noticed it too. Her face went pale. She took one step forward, opening her mouth to shout over the engine noise, just as Wade's radio crackled again with a burst of static, and whatever he heard made his shoulders stiffen. He turned back toward Keanu, expression hardened, as Anna drew in a breath that was about to change the entire night. Anna's voice sliced through the engine noise before Wade could get a word out. "Stop, look under the left wing," she shouted louder than I'd ever heard her. "That's not right, that's not just rain." Everyone's head snapped the same direction. Under the harsh yellow floodlights, the thin dark line I'd noticed a second earlier was clearer now. A narrow, glistening trail snaking from somewhere near the wing root toward the shimmering puddle at our feet. It didn't spread like water. It clung, then broke, beating up in a way that made my stomach twist. Rivas cursed under his breath. "Anna," he hissed, "enough." But Keanu had already stepped closer, squinting through the drizzle. He did crouch right into it, just leaned in, close enough to see the color. The smell hit a second later, sharp, chemical, different from the usual wash of jet fuel and exhaust we all knew by heart. "That's not just rain," he said quietly. Wade paused, torn between the radio at his ear and the small crisis unfolding on the ground. The APU hummed, the beacon lights flashed, and from the open cockpit door I saw Captain Collins appear again, hand on the frame, irritation written clear across his face. "What now?" Collins called down. Anna pointed, voice shaking but steady. "Left wing, there's a leak. It's been vibrating all week and now it's leaking. We have to stop and check it properly." Collins descended 2 steps, squinting against the rain. Rivas, desperate to keep things under control, jumped in first. "It's residual," he said quickly. "Probably from the last service. Condensation, a little hydraulic bleed off. It's normal. We'll wipe it, log it, and—" "It's not normal," Anna shot back, fire in her eyes. It wasn't there 10 minutes ago, it's getting worse. I can smell it from here. For a second, nobody moved. It was one of those moments where the whole world seems to hold its breath. Then Collins came the rest of the way down the stairs, boots hitting the metal with more force than necessary. Let me see. He walked over, hands on his hips, crowding the space like he could will the problem to be smaller by sheer rank alone. He stared at the leak, then at the patch of darkened pavement, then at Anna. "How many pre-flights have you done?" he asked. She swallowed. "A few dozen, I'm still in training, but—" "And I've done thousands," he said. "If there was a structural issue on that wing, you think you'd be the only one who noticed? The diagnostic log is clean. Maintenance signed it off. You're seeing ghosts, not danger." Anna's jaw tightened. I knew enough of her story to know why that word cut deep. Her dad had been a mechanic too, lost in a hangar incident she never talked about in detail. Seeing ghosts was what the investigators had said when he'd written up a minor vibration nobody acted on before it became something fatal for someone else. Before she could answer, Wade finally got whatever verdict he'd been waiting on from the other end of his radio. His expression hardened like someone had just closed a door he'd been trying to hold open. "Mr. Reeves," he said, stepping toward us, "I'm going to need you to step away from the aircraft." Keanu straightened slowly, still halfway between Anna, the leak, and the boarding stairs. "Is that about the flag?" "Yeah," Wade's voice had that clipped tone of a man following orders he disliked. "Our system's tied into federal verification now. Your booking came through under your production company's name, but your passport is under your legal name. The database kicked it as a mismatch. Until they clear it, you can't board any outbound private flight from this facility." Keanu stared at him for a beat. The rain drummed against the tarmac, a little louder now, like the sky wanted in on the argument. "You've flown me 3 times this month," he said, not accusing, just tired. "Same passport, same guy." "I know," Wade said. You could hear the sincerity under the frustration. "But the system changed last week, and my boss is on the line, and his boss is on another line. If I wave you through and it pings during audit, they'll shut us down and I'm out of a job." He lowered his voice. "They're telling the pilot to depart on schedule without you. They say they'll send a backup jet once this is fixed." Maria's hand gripped the stair rail so tight her knuckles went white. "They want us to leave him behind?" she asked, disbelief cracking through her professional tone. "Those are the instructions," Wade said, loudly enough that everyone could hear. "The slot is more important than the manifest, apparently." Collins didn't even pretend to be surprised. "You heard security," he said. "We're burning fuel just sitting here. OPS just pinged me. If we miss this window, we're delayed 2 hours minimum. If they want to send a second jet for Mr. Reeves, that's their call. My job is to get this aircraft and the rest of these passengers safely to Hawaii on time." Keanu's eyes went back to the leak, to Anna, to the plane. For the first time, his calm cracked just a little. "If you're leaving without me," he said quietly, "the least you can do is check that properly." Collins exhaled hard through his nose. "Rivas," he barked, "wipe it down. Note it in the log. If it was severe, the instruments would show it. They don't." "That's not a check," Anna said, voice trembling now. "Captain, please, we need to power down and inspect the line. If it's fuel, if it's hydraulic, if that wing." "Enough." Collins' tone dropped a few degrees, cold and sharp. "This isn't a classroom. We are not grounding a multi-million-dollar flight because a trainee feels something. You're done here. Go inside and cool off before you talk yourself out of a job." Anna flinched like she'd been hit. For a moment she just stood there, rain running down her cheeks, making it hard to tell if what glistened in her eyes was water or tears. Rivas grabbed her elbow. "You heard the captain inside now." She jerked her arm free. "If something happens..." "If something happens," Collins cut in, "it will be on me. That's what captaincy means, not you, not him." He nodded once toward Keanu. "Me." There was arrogance in that, sure, but also a kernel of truth. Pilots carry that burden every time they leave the ground. The problem was, that night, he seemed more determined to protect his authority than the people depending on it. Keanu stepped closer to Anna before Rivas could herd her away. He didn't touch her, just angled his body enough that she had to look at him instead of at the man who just belittled her. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She blinked. "Anna." "Anna," he repeated, like he was committing it to memory. "For what it's worth, I believe you're seeing something real." He glanced at the wing, then back at her. "The world doesn't always listen to the first person who notices a crack. Doesn't mean you stop noticing." Her chin wobbled just once. "My dad, he tried to warn people once," she said, the words spilling out in a rush she probably hadn't planned. "About a vibration. They told him it was nothing. 2 weeks later, a jack failed on another crew. Nobody died, but—" She swallowed. "He never stopped talking about it. Then when he was gone, I promised I wouldn't shut up if I saw something." Keanu's face softened with a pain that looked familiar, like grief recognizing grief. "He'd be proud you spoke up," he said, "even if nobody here deserves you yet." Rivas barked, "Anna, inside," sharper this time. She tore her gaze away from Keanu, standing a little straighter. You could see the war inside her, conscience versus paycheck, promise versus fear. In the end, she stepped back, but not before she looked straight at Collins. "If anything happens," she said, voice low but clear, "I'm writing in my report that I tried to stop this flight." "You do that," Collins replied coolly. "In the meantime, I have a job to do." She walked away, shoulders rigid, disappearing into the shadow of the hangar. I watched her go, feeling like I should follow, say something, do something. But I stayed where I was, clipboard useless in my hands. Out here, there was a whole unwritten manual that said you didn't cross certain lines if you wanted to keep feeding your family. Courage was expensive. Most of us paid in silence. "Mr. Reeves," Wade said again, gentler this time, "I need to escort you back to the lounge while we sort this out." Keanu looked up the stairs at Maria. Their eyes met. Hers full of worry she couldn't voice in front of her captain, his full of something like apology, like he wished he could wrap the whole plane in the same care he gave strangers at baggage carts and back doors. "You don't have to go if you don't feel good about it," he told her. "None of you do." Collins cut in before she could answer. "My crew trusts me," he said. "Don't they, Maria?" She hesitated just long enough for me to notice, then forced a smile that fooled no one. "Yes, Captain," she said. "Of course." Her hand, though, still gripped the rail too hard. Keanu nodded once, not pushing her, not making her choose between her instinct and her chain of command in front of an audience. That kind of respect is its own kind of love, the quiet kind that gives people room instead of demands loyalty on the spot. "Okay," he said to Wade. "Let's go see what the computers think of me." As Wade led him back toward the terminal, the decision above all our heads solidified. Over the PA on the ramp, OPS called out, "Flight 46 cleared to taxi to runway 27. Ground crew, clear all equipment." Rivas shot me a look. "Move the cones," he said. "Let's get this show on the road." I walked toward the nose, pulling back the last of the safety markers, my chest tight. As I passed under the left wing, I risked another look. The line of fluid had spread, thin but undeniable, tracing a shimmering path in the puddle of rainwater. It wasn't gushing, not dramatic enough for anyone to point at and scream, but it was there. Behind me, the cabin door closed with a dull thud. The stairs retracted, the latches sealed. The jet suddenly felt less like a plane and more like a sealed capsule of people who had put their faith in procedures that sometimes blurred the line between safe enough and lucky. From inside the glass of the small terminal building, I saw Keanu through the reflection. He stood a few steps behind the security desk, rain still dotting his hair and jacket, watching his jet without him. He didn't shout, didn't throw a fit. But his hand was pressed against the window, just for a moment, fingers splayed like he was memorizing the shape of the aircraft he'd flown in and out of 100 times before. In the cockpit, Collins' voice came over the ramp frequency in my headset. "Ground, this is Gulfstream 46, ready to taxi." "Gulfstream 46, taxi to runway 27 via Alpha," Ground replied. "Winds 210 at 8, cleared to hold short." The engines spooled up, a low growl rising to a higher, steadier roar. The jet began to roll, tires hissing on the wet pavement, navigation lights blinking against the dark. The line of fluid beneath the wing trembled with the vibration, then widened almost imperceptibly, feeding the puddle with each shudder of movement. Honor appeared at the hangar door, half in shadow, arms folded tightly across her chest. Our eyes met, then both shifted back to the plane, inching its way toward the runway like a massive, gleaming promise everyone assumed would be kept. I don't know if it was the thunder, or the smell, or the way the hair on my arms stood up, but something inside me whispered that we were watching a countdown we couldn't see. Out there on the taxiway, Collins rolled his shoulders, settled into his seat, and lined up his world with the center line he'd trusted for decades. And on the other side of the glass, the man for whom that jet had been chartered, denied a seat by a glitch and an overcautious regulation, stood in the reflected glow of the runway lights, eyes locked on the wing that no one with power had listened to. The last thing I saw before they turned toward the runway was a fresh, thin streak of liquid trembling under the left wing, shimmering like a warning no one wanted to read.